How many times have you felt overlooked? How many times have you silently struggled with the ache of being unseen, unnoticed, while others seem to bask in the spotlight, their names written in lights, their successes visible for all to see? What if I told you that some of the greatest leaders in history, leaders who were destined for greatness, spent years in obscurity, hidden from the eyes of the world, before they ever stepped into the spotlight? That their most powerful seasons of growth and transformation happened when no one was watching. In this video, I'm going to take you on a journey through the lives of some of the Bible's greatest figures. These men had dreams, callings, and destinies, but they had to walk through seasons of obscurity and hiddenness before they could step into their God-given purpose. And what they learned in those seasons can change your perspective on your own journey. This video is not just for those who feel overlooked. It's for anyone who has ever wondered why the spotlight hasn't found them yet, or questioned why they're not where they think they should be. So, stay with me as we unpack the powerful lessons of being hidden. Let's face it, we all want to be noticed. We crave recognition. We want our achievements acknowledged, our names spoken with respect, and our lives to mean something significant. The world around us feeds this desire for fame, for success, for being seen and celebrated. Social media, reality TV, celebrity culture. It constantly reminds us that the spotlight is the place to be. But what happens when you're not there? What happens when the world seems to pass you by? If you've ever felt the sting of being unseen or passed over, know this: you are not alone. There were people who knew exactly what it felt like to be hidden, overlooked, and even forgotten. Their stories may be thousands of years old, but the lessons they learned in the trenches of obscurity are timeless, and they can give us the perspective we need to embrace those painful seasons of hiddenness. Let's start with Moses. Born to Hebrew parents during a time when Pharaoh was commanding the death of every Hebrew male child, Moses had every reason to believe that his life would be short and insignificant. But God had different plans. Moses was miraculously spared, raised in the Pharaoh's house, and trained as a prince. He had everything a person could want: power, position, comfort. But Moses was not content. He knew his heritage. He knew he was meant to do something greater than live in the luxury of Egypt. So, when he saw an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave, Moses acted. He killed the Egyptian, thinking he was acting in God's will. But his actions had consequences. Pharaoh, upon hearing of Moses' crime, sought to kill him, forcing Moses into a life of exile. The prince became a fugitive, fleeing Egypt for the desert of Midian. And there, Moses spent the next 40 years of his life far from the fame and power he once knew, tending sheep. Imagine that for a second. Moses, a man once surrounded by the finest luxuries, now reduced to leading sheep around barren desert hills. 40 years of being hidden. 40 years of feeling overlooked. 40 years in a place where no one cared to recognize his potential, where no one remembered his past glory. 40 years of obscurity. But what did Moses learn during those years? What did God teach him in the wilderness? Moses learned humility. He learned patience. He learned that the wilderness, though painful, was the place where he was transformed. And it was there, in the hiddenness of the desert, that God spoke to him through a burning bush and revealed the destiny Moses had been created for, to deliver the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. But without those 40 years in the desert, Moses wouldn't have been prepared for the greatness God had for him. Moses' season of hiddenness was not wasted. It was necessary for his growth. It was in the desert that God broke Moses down, humbled him, and built him up into the leader who would one day part the Red Sea and lead millions to freedom. Now, let's turn to David, a young man, just a boy, when God chose him to be the future king of Israel. When God sent the prophet Samuel to anoint David, David wasn't even in the room. He was out in the field, tending sheep, doing the work that no one else wanted to do. His brothers were at home, looking the part, presenting themselves as the best candidates for kingship. But God didn't choose them. He chose David, the forgotten son. Imagine how that felt for David. There he was, out in the field, doing work that seemed so menial, so insignificant, while everyone else was being considered for something grand. His own father didn't think he was worthy enough to be called in for the anointing. And yet, God saw something in David that no one else did. But even after Samuel anointed David, David didn't immediately step into the palace. In fact, his life became even harder. Saul, the current king, grew jealous of David's favor with God, and he sought to kill him. For years, David lived as a fugitive, running from Saul, hiding in caves with no title, no throne, and no recognition. But what was David doing during those years? He wasn't just running or hiding. He was growing. He was learning to trust God. He was learning to lead, to fight battles, to lead a band of men, to become the kind of king who would rule with justice and integrity. Those years in hiding were the training ground for David's future. They were the crucible that forged the man who would go on to become one of the greatest kings Israel had ever known. David's greatest moments didn't come when he was in the palace, surrounded by luxury and praise. They came in the wilderness, in the caves, in the times when he was completely hidden from the public eye. Let's talk about Jesus. We know him as the miracle worker, the healer, the Son of God who walked on water, raised the dead, and conquered the grave. But we often skip past one critical detail. He was hidden for 30 years before he ever performed a single miracle. 30 years. The Savior of the world was born in a manger, worshipped by shepherds and wise men. Prophets declared his identity. Angels sang about his birth. And then, silence. We get a brief glimpse of him at 12 years old, astonishing teachers in the temple with his wisdom. But after that, nothing. Not until he turned 30. Imagine that. The one who was fully God and fully man, who had all power and all authority, spent the vast majority of his life in total obscurity. No crowds, no applause, no ministry platform, no Instagram following. Just quiet obedience in Nazareth. A carpenter's son doing daily labor, unrecognized by most of the world. Why would God keep Jesus hidden for so long? Because even Jesus, the sinless Son of God, submitted to the process of preparation. He grew, matured, and developed in private. Luke 2:52 tells us, Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. That growth didn't happen in the spotlight. It happened in the shadows, in the routines of everyday life. What was he learning in those years? He was learning the patience of process, the discipline of obedience, the strength of humility. He was developing the emotional, spiritual, and mental endurance he would need to carry the weight of the cross. If Jesus wasn't in a rush to be revealed, why are we? Jesus was 30 before his public ministry began, and even then he stepped into it with absolute clarity and inner strength because he had done the hidden work. So if you're in a season where no one knows your name, where your calling feels like a distant echo, where you're developing behind closed doors, take heart. You're not behind, you're being built. You don't need a platform to prove you're called. You just need to be faithful where God has placed you. If Jesus was content to wait for God's timing, we should be too. Now, let's talk about John the Baptist, the wild prophet, the forerunner of the Messiah, the one of whom Jesus himself said, "Among those born of women there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist." Matthew 11:11. But where did John come from? Where did this powerful voice emerge from? Luke 1:80 gives us a clue. And the child grew and became strong in spirit, and he lived in the wilderness until he appeared publicly to Israel. Did you catch that? John spent his formative years in the wilderness, not in a temple, not in a palace, not in a place of influence. He was hidden away in the solitude of the desert. No recognition, no spotlight, no platform. Just him, the silence, and God. Why the wilderness? Because God needed to strip John of every distraction. He needed to prepare a voice that would not echo the culture, but confront it. He needed someone who wasn't shaped by politics or popularity, but by truth. The wilderness wasn't punishment, it was purification. Can you imagine the loneliness, the doubt, the questions? God, was I really born for something great? Why am I out here alone while others are celebrated? Why does it feel like the world has forgotten me? But John was being refined in the silence, and when he finally emerged, his voice shook a nation. He didn't need a fancy platform, just the authority of God. People left cities and came to the wilderness just to hear him speak. Why? Because hidden vessels carry deep power. John was hidden until the exact moment when the world needed his voice. He came out of the wilderness burning with conviction, and he prepared the way for the King of Kings. All these people we have talked about so far went through seasons that were painful, difficult, and at times seemingly pointless. They both had dreams and callings from God, but it seemed like their destinies were delayed by their obscurity. It's natural to feel like you're missing out when it feels like everyone around you is stepping into their calling while you're stuck in a season of waiting, struggling with invisibility. The pain of being hidden is real. It's hard to keep going when you feel bypassed, when your dreams seem out of reach, when others are getting the opportunities you long for. But here's the truth. Just because you're hidden, just because you're not in the spotlight yet, doesn't mean God has forgotten you. In fact, your time of hiddenness may be the most crucial part of your journey. It's in these seasons that God prepares you for what's to come. He strengthens your character, sharpens your skills, and deepens your faith. Jesus and John the Baptist, like Moses and David, remind us of this vital truth. God hides what he values. He doesn't put diamonds on the surface. He doesn't place greatness on display before it's ready. And he doesn't rush the development of world changers. So, what can we learn from the stories of these men that experience obscurity despite their position of power? 1. Obscurity is not wasted time. Your time of hiding is not wasted. It is preparation. Just as Moses spent years tending sheep before he could lead millions, and just as David spent years fighting lions and bears before he could lead a nation, your hidden season is where you're being prepared for something greater. Don't despise the hidden years. 2. The wilderness is a place of voice, not void. John found his voice in the wilderness. His clarity didn't come from crowds, but from communion with God. If you feel like you're in a dry, silent place, remember, this may be the very place where your truest voice will emerge. 3. God uses the hidden to shape you. In obscurity, God refines us. He shapes our character, teaches us patience, humility, and trust. When Moses was in the desert, he learned to depend on God. When David was in the wilderness, he learned to trust God's timing and leadership. The same is true for you. God is using your hiddenness to shape you into who you need to be for your destiny. 4. Don't rush the process. God's timing is perfect. Moses and David both had to wait for God's perfect timing to step into their roles. If they had stepped out too soon, they wouldn't have been ready. Trust the process. Trust that in your hiddenness, God is preparing you for something far beyond what you can imagine. 5. Obscurity doesn't equal absence. God was just as present in Jesus' workshop and John's wilderness as he was at the Jordan River and on the Mount of Transfiguration. Just because the crowd doesn't see you doesn't mean God doesn't. Heaven is watching your faithfulness. So, if you're feeling unseen today, if you're feeling overlooked, know that God sees you. Just like Moses and David, your time of hiddenness is not in vain. Embrace the process. Grow where you are. Trust that when the time is right, God will bring you into the fullness of your purpose. And remember, the greatest leaders were often those who learned the most in the shadows. They didn't let the absence of recognition stop them. They used it to become the people they were always meant to be. To everyone watching this who feels like your life is stuck in the shadows, to the ones who feel forgotten, who cry in private, who wrestle with the silence, know this: you are not buried. You are planted. God is doing a deep work in your life. You're not behind, you're becoming. And when the time is right, when your roots are deep enough, when your character is strong enough, He will bring you into the light. And when He does, your voice, your story, your calling will be unmistakable. You're not unseen, you're being prepared. Until next time, stay grounded, stay hidden, and stay faithful. Now, I want to hear from you. How have you felt during your own seasons of hiddenness? What have you learned from those moments? Drop a comment below and let's continue the conversation. And if you found value in this message, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an uplifting message. Thank you for watching. And until next time, keep growing, keep trusting, and keep believing.